love herbs. I grow a lot for our own consumption, but sometimes there's a dilemma at this time of year, harvest time. What do you do with all those herbs, especially basil? You know, basil has a great amount of potassium and iron in it. It's a wonderful herb to use, but if it gets cold in the fridge, sometimes it turns black. But you can freeze basil. You can actually just chop it up, put it in ice cube trays with a little water or oil and make a paste. That's great too. Or even just chop it up, put it on a cookie sheet, freeze it hard like that. It will turn black, but it's good in soups and stews and such. But I've got an old-fashioned way to freeze basil along with Parmesan cheese that is fantastic. It's great, and I don't think you'll ever go back to the old way again. And it's interesting, we've been there, done that with all the artificial stuff. Now we're doing things that our ancestors did. So first of all, of course, you want to take some basil. And the basil that I have here, this is really wonderful. This is an Iranian basil that a friend gave me. It's very lemony along with being clove and citrus-like and licorice tasting as well. So you want to just take your basil leaves and pile them on a table. And this is a pretty basil too. You have to look at this. This is an African blue basil. Beautiful flowers, but it never sets seeds. And it was actually developed by a friend and colleague in Athens, Ohio. It's really pungent. It's almost like a Thai basil to my palate. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chop up a bunch of these leaves. And I'm just going to take my chef's knife. Now don't chop them up into oblivion. You just want to chop them up coarsely. And you know, when you have basil that's been sitting around after you chop it, it'll turn black. That's called oxidation. The air gets on the cut parts and just turns it black. But this way, the basil actually stays nice and green. Turns a pale grayish green, but it stays very nice. So you want to just continue to chop. Like this. Okay, I think that is good enough. And before we go on to our freezing method, I want to show you a little bit. You know, basil is an annual herb. And when it flowers like this, if you don't cut those flower heads off, the plant is signaled to go to seed and then die. Right now, my basil is going to seed. And you can tell the flowers are gone, and then the little flower where the flowers were have turned very dark. And if you just pull these out, and you're going to just rake these with your fingers and remove the old petals, what you're going to find are, see if we can get a good shot of this, tiny black seeds. Save those for next year, and then you've got basil ready to go. So those basil seeds are great to save, and this is the time of year you should be doing that. So here we go. Now what do we do with this chopped basil? You want to take a container that's freezer-proof and some shredded or grated Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. You want to get the good stuff, and you'll know it's the good stuff because the name will be on the outside of the rind. And by the way, when you get to this rind, you can't eat the rind, but it is great in soups and stews. So what I do is I just freeze this, and then when I want to flavor a soup and stew, I'll put it in my soup. Remember to take it out because it gets spongy, but it's a great flavoring agent. So you want to start with the Parmigiano Reggiano. You could do this with Romano cheese as well. And then make a layer of basil leaves, and then more Parmigiano Reggiano, more basil, and just keep layering up, up, up with a layer of basil and a layer of Parmesan until that's good. Let's finish this up. I don't want to waste any of these good herbs. And then just one more layer of Parmesan. Now, you can fill this up or go as far as you need to go, as far as how much basil you have. And what you want to do is you want to take your lid, put it on, label it, Basil and Parm 1008, put it in the freezer, and guess what? It stays great for 6 months. Now, what happens is they flavor each other. The Parmesan actually pulls some of the moisture out of the basil leaves so they stay nice and dry. They don't turn black. They'll get a little lighter. And then the basil flavors the Parmesan cheese. So you can use this in soups and stews and pastas. We put it on pizza, garlic bread. It is just great. Keeps for at least 6 months. Great way to harvest and freeze your basil.